Well, hello there, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. This is Built to Last Performance Under Pressure. On this podcast here today, we're going to be talking about longevity and what it really means to perform at a high level, do it year after year, and do it under constant pressure. And we're going to do it from two lenses. One, the IT lens. And in IT, right, being ready to perform at that high level means that you have to have infrastructure that doesn't just peak on day one, but it's something that really delivers value across the enterprise for its entire life cycle. And then over in football, that lens, it really means that you have to be available, you have to prepare, you have to be disciplined for the long haul of a long NFL season. My name is James Hilliard. Glad to be here as the host for this conversation. Today, joined by several experts from WEI, HPE, and Intel, and respectively, they are Jay Cardin, Seth Lynch, and Chip Monka. I'm glad to have them on board. We're going to take the first part of the conversation, and then later we'll be hearing from NFL legend and former New England Patriot Devin McCourty, and his career really is one of those that exemplifies what it really means to stay in the game. 13 years in the league, and he played almost every single opportunity he had. So we'll be talking about that. First thing, let's talk about this idea of longevity. And Seth, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll go around the virtual table here. But when organizations really think about performance, they often focus on things like the speeds or feeds. And while that's important, more and more longevity is coming into the conversation. It's just as important there because, again, we don't want to just be peaking the first day. We want to have that usefulness of our technology on the long run. Talk a little bit about that. Why is that becoming more important? And how is HPE focusing on that for the benefit of customers?
Sure, James. Thanks. We look at it, and I guess you could go back and keeping with the football metaphor. Most CFOs today play for overtime. They want to extend and drive as much as they can. And you know what? If they're a play caller and you're on the 2 yard line and you've got 7 seconds left, they're going to bring in the kicker and they're going to score the three and they're going to go into overtime, which means they're going to basically keep that infrastructure there and just keep pushing it until somebody finally says we're done. And that's kind of how we've started looking at it. We've even gone to the point where HPE used to run our support contracts, our extended support, in 3, 4, and 5 year segments. Now we've started introducing 6 and 7 year segments on the same ProLiant servers. First, because we know that being something that you can rely on that long, we're going to stand behind it. So we're going to go in and say, we've got 6 or 7 years that we know this is going to work. It may be overperforming at the beginning of the cycle, but in that 6th or 7th year, you're not dealing with a brick. You're not dealing with that iPhone that's barely able to wake up every morning. You're still getting some performance there, and that's why we rely on partners like Intel to bring us chips that allow us to move into that sort of that longevity growth, where day one, you might have more performance than you need. But in 6 or 7 years, we know that they're still performing. They just may not be performing as well as what the newest chips out there are.
And that's something I know a lot of folks do think about these days, especially with the speed of technology and how it's changing. We don't want to buy something now and 6 months later, it's not doing anything for us, right? And so you're talking about that long game. Chip, I know you were smiling there hearing about the HPE story because you had 2 decades there before jumping over to tell the Intel side of the story here with us
Yeah.
today. But talk about longevity and, again, the Intel then perspective there of what you're trying to do for the customer base.
So let me just I was laughing because I love the idea of analogies. I kind of work through those lines. So Seth mentioned the iPhone. I'm a car guy. So what you do is you usually want to buy a car that is fast. It's good looking. Let's not forget I'm Italian, so I like good looking cars. But when I go to the dealer, right, I want to have a car that lasts long. So I want to put tons of mileage on it. And at the end of the day, it has to be safe, has to be, room. It has to be obviously really economic. So in this analogy, clearly the car is what HP has created. So the ProLiant Gen 12, and I know we'll talk more, but the engine in this case is what drives the power, and that is obviously Intel. The thing I want to say longevity wise, Gen 12. It's Gen 12 means 12 generations of ProLiants. And guess what? Each of them came out when Intel released the newest and greatest processor. So we're talking about longevity in terms of partnership, 20 plus years, these two companies working together. So if I'm a customer out there, I bet on these two companies for the foreseeable future. So for sure, longevity is a key game.
Absolutely. And Jay, from the WEI perspective, obviously you've been partnering with Intel, with HPE over the long haul. So comment there, but I'd also really love to hear from you because you're so close to your customers on a regular basis. How are they thinking about longevity? Is that part of the conversation that they have with you saying, hey, Jay, looks like the shiny new object now, but man, is this going to perform for us in 2, 3, 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, that's a major part of every conversation we're having with our customers is about the longevity and the investment that they're putting into this equipment. And, the strategy is to extend the life of these products out longer and longer. And I think Seth mentioned that a little bit about, like, the CIO mandate to get as much value out of these products as they can. And that really does drive us to kind of work with our customers and make sure that we're architecting these solutions so that they do have the longevity and that they will last. And that's, the partnership with HPE and Intel has been terrific. The advancements in the products make that happen.
Seth, we've brought up the HPE Gen 12, and this isn't a conversation that's a deep dive on the technicals, but it is worth talking a little bit about the fact that, again, you guys were just talking about positioning these as built for a longer life cycle. What has really changed in server design to support that in this generation of servers from HPE?
Yeah, so I'll geek out for just a second, and it'll be a minor geek out. So up until the Gen 12 design, HPE and most of the companies building servers out there, we'll say, commercial grade sort of servers and everything, built on kind of a uniform platform, a singular platform for their motherboard. So if you ever pulled a computer apart, that motherboard is just there. It's there and it's going to stay there. And what that did was it forced us to go in and hear from our customers and say, hey, we would like this feature or functionality. We'd say, great, come back to us in 2.5 years because we have to completely redesign the motherboard. What we've done with Gen 12 is introduced a modular design where we're able to take the iterations and take the customer input from what they're looking for in a server today and be able to iterate on that base design as we come through. So that modular design allows us to introduce different, capabilities and everything that you wouldn't have gotten, or you would have had to have waited until Gen 13. Now it's going to be something that we can actually put back into that Gen 12. So when we look at that, that allows you to stick it in your infrastructure for a little bit longer and rely on it a little bit longer. So it allows you to evolve with your workloads. As your workloads modify and kind of modernize, you're going to be able to see that that same product is going to be there, and you're not going to have to wait for the next generation of product.
And Jay, it's not just about technology that promises to be there for the long haul. It is partners like you. It's WEI working with customers to extend the value of that Gen 12 server. You got to right size it, think about the life cycle planning, future proofing. How do you, what's part of the approach that you guys take to do that for customers?
That's a good question. I mean, it starts really at the analysis phase when we begin a project, when we start discussions with a customer about what are they looking to do? What are they trying to what type of workloads are they trying to handle, and what is their expectations for this equipment? How long do they expect to be running these workloads? And using a variety of tools, we're able to go through and run an analysis, look at the workloads that they're running today, and then develop a strategy. And then it's a consultative approach to what those needs are going to be over the next couple of years. We need to extend this lifespan for this product longer because of these mandates.
Yeah, so I want to build on what Jay was saying. So interestingly, what we're building with HPE is a set of tools that can support Jay and the team actually to be even more effective with their customers. So to be more specific, when it comes to Intel, we have a tool that's called Xeon Processor Advisor. Everybody knows as XPA. And the beauty is that if you're a customer, and again, you're buying something that needs to last over time, but at the same time, you're wondering, am I going to get something back and by when? So the notion of ROI, TCO is fundamental. But what we've seen, and also when I was in HPE, it really depends on the person who's dealing with the customer. Some have more structure, others less. These tools basically provide you with the consistency with data. And also, what you could do is just basically you start, hey, I've got 20 old servers. What if, I move to 2 servers? What is the saving I get in power or cooling? And we need to not forget the licensing factor, right? So right now, customers are, crushed by the costs of licensing. So if you reduce the number of CPUs, you're going to have probably more saving on that end than actually the infrastructure side. So XPA is very cool. And we're working closely with HP because they've got the real assessment tool. It's called Cloud Physics. I know acronyms, things, but the point I'm trying to make is the customer should be, sure that, Jay and the team will have the best tools just to get the right answer for this longevity task that they have.
Chip, let me keep it with you as we get into the last couple of questions for you guys. Is I want to talk a little more kind of thought leadership here, right? We had said that it's not just about peak performance day one. We want to be in it for the long haul. How does that impact how you suggest to IT leaders to think about their journeys, their refresh cycles, their modernization journeys, and all? How does that change with what's kind of where the market is and where business is today?
So we spoke about CFOs. These guys have a tough job right now because they have line of business on one end is telling them, "Hey, I need to modernize. I want AI. Everything has to be AI." And sometimes it's not even clear what the outcome could be. But at the same time, they have costs. They're sitting on diverse infrastructure, most of the times pretty old, with a lot of licensing costs, and so they're kind of tied to that. So what I'm really telling to leaders is, listen, this is the right time. So from an infrastructure standpoint, we've got what we need. So Proliant Gen 12 and Xeon 6, which is the technology that Intel has, are really good enough to do probably 80% of the workloads out there, even some AI workloads without, not necessarily putting in a GPU, so graphic performance unit, so which are pretty costly. But you need to do it to the point we're making earlier with key indicators where you're doing this because you're going to get back this money that you reinvest in that area. So modernization right now is more of step one, try to refresh, consolidate a little bit what you're paying in terms of virtual machines, probably through VMware, and then look to implement the new workloads. And by the way, without changing the infrastructure, because that's the other thing, right? You have one thing that's going to last over the years to set the point at the beginning.
Seth, the long game, playing that long game. What's your thoughts, your advice for IT leaders?
I would say, look at the circular economy. Look at your sustainability goals and everything as well, because there's a balance there, and we always go back in and say, there's a certain tipping point where it starts costing you more to actually use an older server to do the workloads the way that you want to do. So look at going in and iterating through. You don't need, and we'll play the football metaphor again. You get more than one draft in your entire career. You get a draft every year. Look at it the same way here. Look at your IT as a draft. Every year, you're going to look and say, what do we need to do within our IT infrastructure to make us most successful? How do we move and reposition our current infrastructure around to take advantage of something that might be a few years old and might need some cost optimization, but may need to be able to continue in and depreciate so that they get the full lifetime value out of it. So really it's reassess every year and look at what's out there. If you would have gone in 3 years ago and said, you need to start planning on AI large language models, everybody would have laughed at you. But you know what? A year ago, everybody knew that they needed to start getting ready to bring in AI large language models. So just do that and iterate every year. Go in and look at it, set up a cycle and set up a schedule, and understand that you can move workloads just like Chip was talking about. You can move workloads to the most optimized position, and you'll probably end up getting the highest cost optimization out of simply paying for services to move those workloads to something that's a less performative server at the time, then it wouldn't necessarily be just to buy a whole new infrastructure there. So that's kind of what I'd recommend, and I'd point out to IT leaders.
And Seth and Chip, Jay, have just kind of set up the last thing I want to chat with you about. And it's this idea that you're not looking to rip and replace every single year. You're looking to iterate. You're looking to rebuild, right? Football teams don't usually cut everybody and start from scratch, right? They evolve over time and everything. So talk a little bit about that of why they should be IT leaders today and the teams you work with should be thinking about that iterative approach, that evolution instead of just the something new, let's just rip and replace and try something new again.
Yeah, no, it's that gets into the strategy that I think Seth talked a little bit about with the with the HP ProLiant Gen 12 servers and the modularity of these servers is that they can be continually upgraded, they can be reassessed, you can move workloads around. And, you do have to look at that strategically, and like Seth said, you look at this maybe every year and reevaluate what your demands are and what your requirements are. Where, WEI would come in, we would go through and work with you to run those assessment tools to determine what those workload needs really are and how we can extend the life of the solution that you've already invested into.
But obviously, we've been talking here availability, preparation, reliability. That has a clear parallel outside of IT right over to the NFL. And there are few people out there that understand performance under pressure better than our next guest, a two-time Pro Bowler. You're going to see behind him three-time Super Bowl champ with the New England Patriots. You've watched him on NBC's Football Night in America. Devin McCourty is with us. And Devin, good to see you today. I appreciate you taking time.
No, no problem, man. Appreciate you having me.
You heard a little bit of our conversation here, and you did play at one of the highest levels, really, of any NFL player that you could really ask for. I believe, if I have my stats right, there were 210 games you could have played in. You played in 205. And that's something that I think blows a lot of people's minds. You had that longevity out there. What allowed you personally to sustain that level of performance, focus, et cetera, year after year?
Yeah, I think the first thing is I took pride in that. It was something that I think set me apart. It gave me an edge, and I think in professional sports that's the key, right? It's finding an edge and finding whatever your strengths are and making them that strong point. I found out the way I prepared my body, and that includes so many different things. I think when people think that they think working out and lifting super heavy, but it was everything. I remember right around when I was 28 years old, 29 years old, I switched trainers in my off season. And then my new trainer, everything he spoke about or he had me do, he said, I'm only going to have you do things that help you, but it also is an injury prevention type of drill. And we based everything on that. It wasn't about numbers. It wasn't about posting videos on Instagram to show people different things. It was how can I prepare your body for the impact you're going to take? How can we fix your running style enough? Not that you're like over here in your 10th year trying to change how you run, but how can we fix small things so that we don't get a hamstring? Or how can we lift to better prepare your shoulders for the impact your body's going to take? And then nutrition, making sure I stayed on top of that. Getting married and having a wife and understanding how I ate was how she was going to eat, and then our kids eat that way. So all those little things went into, and then the obvious thing is there's a tiny bit of luck sometimes in staying healthy over, that long period of time. Getting bent the wrong way or a body angle going somewhere, you kind of panic right away and then you move a knee slowly. And like, okay, I'm all right. I get to play another snap. So it was trying to compile all those things into one. And hopefully it turns out the way you want, but you got to prepare, put the work in, hope for the good fortune.
I want to follow two little follow-ups here. One, did you ever hear chatter of them talking about, man, this guy's been playing 100 games. This guy played 150 games. This guy is like closing in on 200 games. Like, was that chatter that you ever heard from opposing players that were kind of intimidated by the fact that you're just the Iron Man out there?
Oh, not really. I think as players, I had no idea I was coming up on my 200th game when it happened. I was actually like, I think I was about to meet with Belichick. We were about to do our captain's meeting, and they're like, "Hey, you got to hurry up and go do media." And I was like, "What do you mean? We have captain's meeting? Like, why? Like, I'm gonna do media after." And I walk in, and Matthew Slater's in there and they're presenting 200 yards. Like, I had no idea. But I do think one of the key things is snaps. Like, we all pay attention as players, how many snaps you play in the game. What is your percentage? Guys have money tied into that. So you want to be on the field. You want to earn that extra money that you could possibly get. And that was something I always talk to young guys about, of how to kind of stay out there on the field, because that's one of the keys to being successful in any professional sport, is being out there on your field or arena, whatever it is. You got to be out there to be able to compete.
Want to talk a little discipline. Um, how many times did you miss film?
There's no such thing.
Yeah. Which is the answer I was hoping for, because that's the daily discipline. You have to do the dirty stuff, maybe the boring stuff. Film is something that's your learning abilities and everything. But talk about, why were you so dedicated, not just motivated to do that, but why were you dedicated to doing that, and how did you pass that type of discipline on to younger players as you aged in your career?
Yeah, I think the beauty of being in the NFL, it's truly like a fraternity. And I remember I got there, and the coolest thing is we're all fans of, if you like football or whatever you're a fan of, but I'm obviously a huge football fan and grew up that way. So when you first walk in the locker room, you don't walk in as like the first round pick, Devin McCourty, ready here to serve and make plays. You walk in as a fan. So you walk in the locker room, and I walk in and my locker's next to Kevin Falk. And I'm like, man, I remember watching Kevin Falk at LSU. Like, and you start going through all these memories as a kid, and the next thing you know, I'm, midway through my rookie year, and Kevin Falk's like, "Hey man, what's the routine like now?" I was like, "What do you mean?" He was like, "To be good in this league, you gotta have a routine, something you do day in and day out. Like, you can perform because you checked all these boxes of your routine." And I was like, I don't know. So I just followed Kev. Kev, I hated the sauna, but he got in the sauna every day. So when he got in the sauna, it was him, it was Vince Wilfork, it was Randy Moss. So I would just get in the sauna because he got in. But through that, I would get all of these stories of these guys that I looked up to as a kid, and they would tell me all these things. And then what I learned was, okay, I now have my daily routine. And then out of nowhere, next thing you know, you have a Thursday night game. And then K Falk was like, all you do is you just move your schedule up, you move your routine up, you figure out how to move your routine around a new schedule. And with that comes the, like you just spoke about, the film study and those things. That's back to finding that edge. That's how you get better. And for me, it started with when I left high school, I didn't have a lot of offers. School said I wasn't good enough. My first year at Rutgers, I was a seventh string safety. So I developed this mentality of, I got to work when other people aren't working or I won't survive. And then you become a first round draft pick, and everyone usually thinks you've been good your whole life and that you've always been like the top of the class. But for me, it didn't start that way. So when I became a first round draft pick and I took that same work ethic and mentality and the daily routine and put it to work, then I learned, okay, this is how I have success in the NFL, and was able to do it, for 13 years. And that all in itself, I look back now and like, man, I can't believe I did that for 13 years. But when you're in it, you don't have time to think about that.
Right, when you're in the middle of that. I mean, it's being awesome at the basics. It's doing that grind. That's what we're talking about. That's something we have to do in business as well. You also touch on a little bit of flexibility. We have to be, especially in business with all the changes that come so quickly in technology, we have to be flexible as leaders out there. Another thing we have to be in what we expect in business, and I want you to talk about this on the football field, is you have to be available. And sometimes maybe you aren't starting. Maybe there, but you have to be ready, kind of that next man up mentality. You have to trust your teammates are going to be ready if for some reason you miss a game. So talk a little bit about that, about why it's so important to be mentally available, physically available, being there for the team, even if maybe you're not the one on the field at the time.
Yeah, right. The best ability is availability. It doesn't matter how talented you are, how smart you are, if we can't count on you to be where you're supposed to be, if whether you're on a football team, whether, you're working for a business and someone's counting on you to be somewhere at a certain time, or to count on you to finish whatever project by a certain time so then they can do their job. I learned that early on, and I think that went back for me. all right, I want to be available, but the way I become available is blocking out distractions, figuring out what I need to do to be focused on my task and doing those things. I think sometimes people think, well, I'm doing what you just said, I'm doing all the physical things, but then they're skipping out the mental part of the game. They might study for a little while, but they're not assessing who they are as a person. Some people, they don't do well by, hey, I'm going to give you a packet of papers or a playbook, go study it on your own. Some people need to get up, be on their feet, walking through something or looking at a computer and typing it up, not just reading. And when you make it in a professional, you make it to the job that you always dreamed of, it's your job to know what type of person you are and then figure out, okay, how do I best learn and how do I make that available for me to do it that way? And 13 years in the NFL, I saw some of the best athletes that God has created, and they can't find out a way to get on the field because they don't have the mental aspect or they don't want to put in the type of work that's now needed to compete in the NFL because they're still stuck on the standard of what they used to do that made us successful in college or a level below. And they don't want to figure out a way how to be successful in the NFL because it takes more. And I've always learned that it's challenging for people sometimes to say, hey, this takes a little bit more. And if I put in more and I don't make it, I have this kind of fear of failure. And I learned that early on that you can't succumb to that. Like if you're gonna try to be great, you gotta go, you gotta put in. I heard you guys talk about, looking at your IT is like the draft. Every year you're reassessing what's there. And when you play professional sports, each year is not a secret, right? In life, you get older. And when you get older and you're still trying to play football, you can't always do the same things you did when you were 25 and I was 35. Like my body needed more attention. I needed to do things different. I had to ride a bike sometimes instead of running and take off the wear and tear of my legs. So it's learning who you are. And then that helps you become available because you know how to take care of yourself. And that might change year after year. If you get an injury, it might change month after month. You have to stay on top of it.
One of the other things that we talked about with Jay was talking about evolving, right? And not a rip and replace. Now, again, some teams do seem to do that in the NFL now and again, but
They're
the best
usually not
one,
successful though.
right? Exactly. So the best ones evolve. 2010 New England Patriots were a whole lot different than the 2022 New England Patriots. That's the bookends of your career. I don't care about what was different. Tell me what was the same about all of those teams and how those little things that were the same continue to evolve and get better.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I loved about what I learned is going into New England, right? Everyone throws around this word culture. And, it would be easy for me to sit here and say, man, the culture was the same in New England. But I think why the culture was the same was the people. And I read Culture Code, a book, and that's when I dug more into like, what does that actually mean, culture? Because people think sometimes if you see a Patriot sign, then that culture just comes with it. But the Patriots signed in 2000 when, Teddy Bruschi and Vrabel and all those guys, their teams weren't the same as the teams I came on, right? When I came in, it was like this generation, the same thing I said at my end of my career. This generation doesn't understand as the new kids came in, but it's how people operate. It's having good people around. And that was the same in 2010 when we were 14-2, and in 2022 when we were 8-9 and didn't even make the playoffs. I learned through my last 3 years when it wasn't the same level of success that the people had to stay the same. You had to continue to build and be the type of person that you wanted to be through adversity. It's all good and it's all great when you're winning and you're in conference championships year in and year out. It's easy to show up. It's easy to do the things you're supposed to do. But that 2022 season was awesome for me as my last year, and I kind of knew it was going to be my last year. But it was very challenging because I'm like anybody, right? If you know it's going to be your last year and you've reached the mountaintop, you're like, man, it would be great to go out the right way and do all these things. And you don't get to do that. But a part of that was I got to be a part of some younger guys' journeys, right? Guys like Marcus Jones that I still talk to today. And he tells me things that he saw me do or things that I told him. And you start to realize that that's legacy, right? How you invest into somebody else, how you serve other people, and that keeps going on. And the guy like me that came in 2010, that got that leadership from Kevin Falk, Gerard Mayo, Vince Wilfork, I got to be that guy at the end in 2022 to different players, which was very rewarding.
Hey, you've given us a lot of insights here. A couple rapid fire kind of questions for you. Devin's favorite stadium, and this can go from high school to college. Favorite stadium you ever played in?
For me, it's pro, it's MetLife. Being a guy that played at Rutgers, playing in high school football in New Jersey, playing well and beating the Jets at MetLife was always a fun time. And my last game at MetLife, I had 2 interceptions. That's when I was like, man, this is a sign. I need to retire after this year. I get to walk out on top at least at MetLife.
I love it. Least favorite stadium to ever play at?
Oh, least favorite. West Virginia in college. Never beat West Virginia when I was at Rutgers.
Okay. All right. You've got some kiddos. Have you ever, I don't know if you're coaching anything. They're in that age where they might be doing some sports. Are you coaching them now? Are you
I
enjoying
am.
that?
I am. I've actually told all like my buddies that are now done, don't go into coaching college or pro or anything until you coach your kids. The amount of fun I have coaching my kids, and not just my kids, but watching some other kids who come in. Like I did flag football the last 2 years, and we've had kids that this is their first time playing, and they're horrible in the beginning, and they're trying to figure it out. And we had a kindergarten and first grade team, and one of our toughest games of the year, a kindergartner pulls the flag off 4th down for us to win the game. And I have a video where I run on the field, I throw him in the air and catch him. And his dad sent me the video, like he doesn't even understand how cool this video is. But like that to me is what you get to experience with the younger kids of them just not having much confidence, not knowing what to do. And then by the end of the year, it's only a few weeks, they gain this confidence, they have fun, and then most importantly, they play again. So I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Awesome. I'm glad you're getting that experience. Hey, you brought up Matthew Slater. He and I chatted a couple months back. Again, 3-time Super Bowl champ, 10 times in the Pro Bowl. He was a gunner out there. He and I are both California kids. I'm NorCal, he's SoCal. I asked him how he adjusted and got used to playing in New England. And he said, "You think I did?" He hated it, the cold and all that. You're smiling, I'm telling the truth here. Let me ask you this as a New York guy, and then in New England your whole career and all. Did you ever get used to the 80 plus degree games, or did you like cold games over the real hot, sweaty, sticky ones?
No, no, I'd rather be warm. Even though I'm in New York, like I'd rather be warm in those games. But I also, and Slater is one of my best friends and my favorite teammate of all time. But, like, that's the thing, when you're from New York and you're from the Northeast, we're just tougher than the West Coast, California, like, there's just a different toughness that comes with being from up here, so but no, I also think that's a part of mentality, being able to do those things. When we used to do joint practices, 2012, I think it was, we went to Tampa, we practiced against Tampa, and when I was in New England, I would always wear long tights and a long sleeve shirt all training camp to try to make it tougher, and we were going to Florida and guys were like, "Man, I'm taking off my shield. I'm not wearing anything under my pads." Well, I was like, "Man, y'all are soft. I'm going out there, visor on. I'm wearing long sleeves. I'm doing all of that." And it was hot. It was tough. But for me, that was like a mental game I was playing against myself of, can I perform in these conditions? Especially there were times we opened the season in Miami and like that's rough. And you try to prepare yourself. You try to find any way to kind of help game day. And I would always look for those different moments.
And it goes back to what you had shared a bunch of times earlier, right? Find that little edge, right? That little thing that can get you going there. All right. When we wrap up here, go ahead and text Matthew, let him know how soft he is. I appreciate you taking time and joining us here and all the insights, Devin. Really appreciate it. And best of luck moving forward with everything in your career on television, et cetera. And folks, before we wrap up here, again, whether it's looking at football and being a champion there or enterprise and business structure, right? The lessons are very, very similar. That sustained championship level, that winning level, it's not just an overnight thing. It's not just the quick wins. It really is building the systems, building the teams, performing under pressure, learning from the challenges, and then continuing to drive forward. And again, early part of the conversation, we were talking about how HPE Gen 12 servers, how Intel, how WEI all come together, right? And they're not just building servers. They're building technologies that you get to build your teams on, and that durability, the availability, all those things are so important to your individual organization so you can succeed. Last thing I wanted to do before we close out, I know that Seth, Jay, and Chip were listening along here. I'd love to just go around the corners there, around the table here. Something that Devin shared that kind of you're going to ponder about or gave you a chuckle or a smile or whatever. And Jay, I'm gonna start with you.
Well, it is actually more, I would say, wholesome, but the story about family and just understanding that you got to be in good health and you've got to eat proper, and how it affects your children and your wife. It all comes together. I really enjoyed that. That was a great story.
Seth, what about you?
I'd have to say, Devin mentioned having to be a fan first. And I think that's true in anything that you do professionally. You have to be a fan before you really get into what you're doing. So, as IT professionals, I think everybody in here is a fan of what they do. They love the technology. They love what they're touching and feeling, and how they support and help their organizations, the public, whatever it is that they're doing in day-to-day life. So I think that whole idea of being a fan first actually kind of changed my perspective on a way to go in and start a meeting off. Who in here is a fan of what they do every day?
And Chip, you get the last word on this.
Yeah, so there's like was interesting was the notion of culture, right? So if there's a culture, then it's easier to align, objectives. And when I think about especially HP and Intel, I can tell you because I moved from one company to the other, we share a really similar culture. So this translates in a lot of things that work better. But to be honest, that secret around success, that it comes over time, that you need to be prepared. Obviously, the consistency, but I really like the injury protections part of it. I mean, if you get injured or if a system is, having a downtime, that doesn't play well with business. So that was quite interesting. I use it for sure in my future presentations. So thanks a lot.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate all four of you guys, Seth and Jay, Chip, and Devin, for having the conversation here. Folks, hope you got some things to think about. Hope you enjoyed the insights shared by everybody. If there is more information that you want to learn about those HPE Gen 12 servers, all the things that come with the power of HPE and Intel together with WEI to set you up for success moving forward, then we encourage you to visit online at WEI.com to get more information. If you've got a team in place there already, for sure, reach out to them. But if you're new, WEI.com. With that, on behalf of everybody, my name is James Hilliard. Thanks for joining us, and we do look forward to talking to you all down the road.